Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ProductTank event today. We're so happy to see you all. Despite being a very nice summer's day, we're so glad you chose to be here indoors to learn more about product management. I'm sure you guys are very keen to hear our speakers, but before we begin, I'll just give a quick introduction about ProductTank and who our sponsors are. So I won't take more than 2 minutes, don't you worry. So ProductTank is a meetup for product people by product people. We organize these monthly conferences for people like yourselves to network with other product individuals and learn from the community as well. We give, tonight's agenda, so we'll have the talk starting at around 7:05. We have 3 speakers who'll speak for around 15, 20 minutes. Then we'll have a short break of around five-ish minutes to set up for Q&A, followed by like a 15, 20-minute Q&A, and then you have an opportunity to network as well. So yeah, like I said, with ProductTank, you have many opportunities to contribute if you are keen. So you have an opportunity to speak. If you are interested in speaking at ProductTank, like this one, please do scan this QR code. It will take you to our form. It only takes 2 minutes to complete. Or you can host or sponsor a ProductTank. To do so, please speak to someone like myself who volunteers at ProductTank. We're wearing one of these t-shirts or one of the speakers as well, and they can direct you to the right place. You can also write for Mind the Product, and there's other information there as well. So if you're interested, please reach out after the event, and we're more than happy to facilitate you. So, and do follow us and tag us on LinkedIn as well. Yes, a big thank you to our sponsor, Visa, who sponsored us here today. Visa is looking for great product talent as well. So if you are interested in working for Visa, a very product-led company, then please reach out to someone that's got a Visa badge, and they'll be more than happy to introduce you and to tell you the next steps as well. So without further ado, we also have a Q&A at the end. This is a live Q&A, so you can enter your questions throughout the conversation. Please just scan this QR code. This isn't the only opportunity you'll get. You'll have opportunities later as well to scan and enter your questions. We'll then take the questions all the way at the end. It is recommended if you find a question that you do like, please upvote it because we won't have time to answer all the questions. So the higher voted a question is, the more likely we are to ask it. So today, our speakers and our event is called Navigating Your Product Career, and we have 3 wonderful speakers. So without further ado, let us invite Saj, who's a senior product manager here at Sokin.
Thank you. 1%. 1%. This is what myself and a cohort of around 100 folks were told out in a conference room similar to this as the graduate intake over at Procter & Gamble. We were out in a beautiful hotel. Most of the hotel had been booked out by the business, and the regional head of Europe came down. And part of the motivational speech that they gave to us was about the opportunity that lay ahead and how we, just being there today, were part of the 1%. So I sat there and reflected for a moment. I thought, okay, great. I must have done something right throughout the application process. As someone who's definitely struggled with confidence, this was a nice confidence booster for me. Now, this 1% number is important. We're going to come back to it. I'm going to do a quick sidestep, and then we'll come back, and I promise you, it'll make sense. So a very quick question. Who here in the room has heard of Sokin before? Excellent. So for those that are tuning in online, that's probably a handful of folks here, maybe not even 10% have heard of Sokin before, but that's great. So Sokin is a B2B cross-border payments business. We're licensed in most of the major markets around the world, which allow us to move money conveniently for our businesses across borders and across currencies. Over at Sokin, I'm building out our payment acceptance solutions, specifically building out our payment gateway to empower merchants to reach their customers in their local market and pay in their preferred way to pay. Backed by our core multi-currency FX offering, we can also enable our merchants to do like-for-like settlement so they can choose how to control their FX. Now, Sokin's been on a huge growth journey. For those of you that hadn't heard of us, you may have seen some of these news articles. If you haven't, you will now. So we had some backing from Morgan Stanley. We were mentioned out on the Sunday Times 100 top tech companies. We recently partnered with Excel and also Nottingham Forest. So with this growth, I had a great opportunity. I'm now growing my team. I had the opportunity to put out 2 new product roles. The first one I'm hiring out for in London, and the second one out in Toronto. Now, the important thing here is that we put our product roles live about the beginning of this month. Within 2 weeks, we'd received close to 1,000 applications. So the point coming back to that 1% here, for anyone of those that are quick with maths or maybe a little bit more average at maths like me, you'll realize that trying to get a product role at Sokin, a company that most of you hadn't heard of before, is less than 1%. So what does that mean? That means this is hard. Trying to break into product right now is really hard. I can guarantee most of you had probably heard of Procter & Gamble and many of the companies that they own. Sokin, only a handful of folks had heard of. And like I said, a less than 1% chance of trying to secure a role in product right now at this business. But you can do this. I believe in you. And together, we can definitely do this. Anyone who says you can't do it, use them to fuel your fire forward and prove them wrong. Today, I'm going to try to share 3 strategies that you can utilize to maximize your success rate, sharing the things that I've learned through my past experiences, as well as what I've been doing through the hiring process here at Sokin. First things first, get the basics right. You'll be surprised how many CVs that I was reviewing where it was a blob of text, a blob of text, a blob of text, and sometimes multiple pages of blobs of text. Now, in reality, when the odds are that high and it's really difficult, you really can't afford to lose at this point. So utilize the XYZ formula. This is a Google format that's been shared. And actually with AI these days, you can take your blobs of text, if you've got them, you can put them into the AI tool, ask it to put it into this format for you, and you've got your first draft. So really there's no excuses not to be utilizing this. Now you don't necessarily have to do XYZ, but what I'm talking about here is show me the data, show me what you've done, show me how you've led in your roles. Limit your CV to 1 to 2 pages. No one has time to be able to review multiple pages. What you're telling me, if you're using more than 2 pages really, unless you've got many, many years of experience, is you can't communicate concisely and you can't communicate clearly, which are 2 absolutely critical things for any PM. Also, put product management on your CV. So this one is perhaps a little bit contentious because folks might not actually be a product manager right now, or you might not feel like you're doing product management. But again, you have to think about this. In the modern world with AI, there's going to be AI used on both sides. This is a key word. You want to be able to show to folks, again, when the competition is this high, that you are in and around product management. Think about other keywords as well that you might want to include in your CV. Now, you can spin this, right? So I appreciate that you might not feel like you're doing product right now, but you can still spin it. You can push and show people, tell them the story about how the role you're doing has a lot of parallels with product management. And also prep for your interview. So this is really key. You've made it through the first round. Now it's really important that you nail the interview. And there's plenty of great resources online that you can utilize for this, but make sure you're aware of product sense, execution, prioritization, and leadership. And again, really make sure that you show us how have you driven, how have you been in control of the projects that you're leading. Don't tell me about where you were a passenger along the way. Even if you were a passenger, try and show the impact that you drove within that opportunity. Now, finally, on CVs, was there anything else to add on CVs? That might have been it. I'll come back to it if anything comes back. Okay, so these are the things that I want to make sure we get right on the CV side. Number 2, build beyond your role. So this is something you can do either internally at work or beyond work in side projects. Now, internally at work, you might not currently have a product role and you want to try and break into product. You can lean on your PM friends, utilize opportunities to try and get involved, support maybe with BA work, support with trying to be, if you're a developer, maybe try and pick up some of the Scrum Master responsibilities, support and expand your skill set. Beyond work, so this one is super important. I can kind of guarantee that 90% of people in the room probably won't do this, and that's kind of okay because it takes a lot of effort, but trying to build on the side can help you plug your gaps. So if you're at a business today where you don't feel like you're doing enough customer interviews, or you don't feel like you're doing enough A/B tests, and you want to go somewhere where they do A/B tests, in reality, right now, with the level of competition, you need to have exposure to this, and you need to be able to talk about it. How do you do that if you don't do that in your role right now? Build on the side. Again, with AI right now, arguably all of us could open up Lovable or Bolt.new. We could put in a very short 2-line prompt, and we'd have a prototype in front of us. We could take that to our friends. We can ask them, what do they think? Get feedback, iterate. These are ways you can help plug your gaps and help improve the stories that you tell when you're in the interview. Finally, network strategically. So something that used to happen a lot when I previously worked over here at Visa was people would do a cold reach out when there was a new job that had gone live and say, hey, please can you refer me to this? Now, whilst I appreciate that you're trying to get into the system and I respect what you're trying to do, Visa had a policy. If you haven't worked with this person before, how are you going to refer them in? And it makes sense. Why would businesses want their employees to refer people they've never worked with before or don't know how they work? So don't be like this person. Try not to do the cold interviews, cold reach outs. Try to be a bit more engaged. Try to catch them earlier. If you know that you're wanting to try to break into product, you know there's industries that you're interested in, reach out to these folks and start to try and build rapport. Just by being here today, anyone who's trying to break into product is leveling themselves up. There's an opportunity to network at the end. Make sure you maximize on this opportunity. Speak to the great people here. I can already see across the room many of my ex-colleagues who are all fantastic product managers. So they will have a lot to share with you. Maximize that opportunity, learn from them. So just to kind of recover these points, very simply, get the basics right, build beyond your role, and network strategically. It is really hard out there, genuinely really hard. But you've got this, and finally, you can do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarge, for sharing his tips of how you can break into product management. This is the Slido link again, if you guys want to ask any questions through Slido. So now moving on to the next talk, let's say you've broken into product management, like a lot of you here will be product managers or even senior product managers. And as a senior PM or someone in the product career, you realize that you have two usual streams you can go down, either the managerial route or the IC route. So to speak more about these two routes, I'd like to invite Maria.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's get comfortable with this. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Ladusane, and I'm a principal product manager at Tesco. And today, I'm going to take you on a journey of 20 years of my career up to date, which in retrospective had a theme around it. And that theme was change. So before we jump in, I'd love to have a show of hands if you had a career change so far. Wow, almost everyone. Amazing. So you totally understand where I'm coming from with this one. So my first big encounter with change happened very early on. I was 11 years old when tanks rolled over the streets of Moscow. It was an attempt of military coup in 1991. And thousands of people went out on the streets to protect democracy. I was too young to understand what was going on. The military coup failed, but it led to a collapse of Soviet Union and the change of life around me as I knew it. But what I learned from it was that change was not something to be afraid of, but to embrace, because when nothing is certain, anything is possible. So I've started my career in digital when Amazon was still a toddler, Google was making their first steps, and Mark Zuckerberg, he was still a teenager. And you were a famous blogger in my country if you had 1,000 followers. I found myself on a marketing side of internet, and I ran digital campaigns for companies like Samsung and Nokia. Does anyone know this guy? Yes, I promoted his concert on Red Square. Quite a highlight. So I spent years in the marketing career and eventually became a marketing director for one of the biggest banks in my home country. And that is where I felt that I'm a bit stuck in my career and I wasn't entirely sure what I want to do. So I jumped into international MBA program, hoping that it will give me some clarity. Well, it didn't. I graduated with sharper business thinking and an amazing network of peers. But INSEAD MBA program, as amazing as it is, doesn't provide you with a roadmap to your career. I guess that part is on us. So, long story short, I landed my first product management role in 2011 by pure luck. The job market was very tough, but hiring managers saw something in my CV, and I became a product manager at Yale. I fell in love with the craft very quickly, researching customer insights, building strategies, doing data analysis, experimentation. Those were all the things that I loved. I worked really hard, and I made the way up to head of product. The highlight of my time at Yale was when I scaled a product that became a talk of the boardroom, and it was promised millions in investment. And at that point of time, I felt like I can really make an impact as a product manager. Fast forward 7 years, and I was at a crossroads of my career again. And that was the first time I received an offer for a senior IC role. It was a principal product manager to work with a product leader that I knew from before in a company that was hungry for innovation. And it also provided a path back to people management. I would be looking after innovation pipeline, and then if one of the bets would take off, I would scale it and build my team around it. So I jumped in. And a few weeks into the role, I started feeling that I'm struggling. There were no more continuous releases, no more metrics to obsess over. Instead, lots of meetings, legal reviews, PowerPoint. Reflecting back on that experience, there were things that I really, really liked about the role, and there were things that proved fairly difficult. So what I loved about it was really diving deep into why we're building and what is the customer problem that we want to solve, and make sure that the company is focused on the right thing. 0 to 1 innovation is truly exciting, and it's not often that a product manager gets to build something from scratch. It is a very special space where you need to get scrappy, move fast, and also stay curious. And then I had a lot of influence on very big decisions. I wasn't hired to execute someone's vision. I was brought in as an expert, and the calls that I was making were shaping the direction of the product organization for 12, 24 months' time. On the flip side, it felt like a lonely journey sometimes. As a principal product manager, I was operating 2 levels above anything that was happening on the ground. So it was not easy to stay connected with actual product teams, and I had to put efforts into that. Then the impact I wasn't feeling it the same way. I was looking at the bets of 12, 24 months, and I didn't see any numbers moving every week. So the progress was there, but it was slower and it was less visible. And then competing for resources was hard. I was championing new long-term bets, but asking for resources from the same pool as teams that were scaling known winners. And I really had to double down on my influencing skills to secure that commitment for those longer-term bets, as it's much easier to prioritize things that have a proven return on investment. So I successfully killed all the 3 projects in the innovation pipeline. None of them proved to be the company's next big thing. And by the end of my principal product manager journey, and it was a contract role, I was really hungry for team dynamics, continuous releases, and big portfolio opportunities. So over the next years, I've built my career in people management roles. So I led teams as a product director at Trustpilot and global head of product at Just Eat Takeaway. Waving to Kiraj, product manager from my team. And 5 years into that career path, I also started realizing the pros and cons of the role. So what I loved about it, that every day was different. There was no routine. I was juggling stakeholders, new priorities, and solving new problems with my team every day. I was seeing the impact. It is a special feeling, a special satisfaction to see numbers moving in the right direction. It is a very fast feedback loop, and it's very energizing. And then I was helping others grow. So seeing people on my team hitting a career milestone, building their confidence and skills, getting recognized for their work, that was really fulfilling. What was not so easy is that stress levels were very high at times. In the companies that move fast and go through a lot of change of priorities, you're running at 100 miles per hour. And with no opportunities to recharge, I was feeling like I'm running on empty. People management can be emotionally draining. When the company is going through a lot of change, it's not easy to keep your teams motivated and focused on the longer term outcomes and longer term picture, despite the daily turbulence. And that can be really exhausting. Last but not the least, you don't get to do product strategy as much as you would want to. You're so busy running the portfolio that the strategy tends to come from elsewhere, from your business stakeholders, from your leadership, and sometimes I felt like I'm just executing someone else's vision. So when I was presented with another opportunity to take on an IC role, I knew that I need to ask better questions. So I did. I asked, why are you hiring for this role? And what the person in this role would be doing, what problems they will be solving. I wanted to make sure that the company understands the value of senior ICs and the impact that they bring. What do you see this person doing in this role in 3 years' time? I wanted to make sure that this role is attached to a longer-term vision and will not become at risk in 12 to 24 months' time when the first stab on product strategy is done. And the last one was, do you provide a path to people management from IC roles? I wanted to keep my options open in case in a few years' time I would be seeking to return to people management career track, and I could do that within the same company. So I come to nearly 1 year as a principal product manager at Tesco, and I really enjoy it. Tesco understands ICs. It has an IC track that goes from product manager to senior product manager to principal product manager. And principal product managers sit at the same level as heads of product. And my work at Tesco is autonomous, it is strategic, and it has impact. And no one asked me to approve their annual leave for months, though. That's a bonus, too. So, looking back, I can't say I had a master plan. But there are a few things that I learned the hard way, and if they're helpful to someone today, they're worth sharing. First of all, change is inevitable. You're gonna experience change throughout your career, whether it's self-inflicted or due to circumstances. So knowing how to embrace change and having that resilience will help you navigate your career. Second, ask good questions before you leap. Make sure that the role is gonna interest, excite, energize you in the longer term. It's gonna be sustainable. So think of it as part of the journey, not just a step in your journey. And then expect the unexpected, especially in senior IC roles. You will be expected to carve out your path, and the impact is all usually self-defined. Your role is not going to be what it is on your job description. So if that is the past and the present, what about the future? There's a lot of talk about the rise of IC roles, and I agree to an extent. I think senior IC roles are mostly found in more advanced, developed product and technology organizations. So we're talking about organizations of 100 people in product and tech. That is about the scale where there is a need to bring senior ICs that can deepen the domain knowledge, build the strategy, and connect dots across complex product ecosystems. The other trend that I'm seeing is in hiring. If you take 5, 7, 10 years ago, the generalist product manager profile was pretty common. You could go easily from B2B to B2C, from e-commerce to fintech. Now, with more and more people entering the profession every year, the pool of candidates is really strong. And companies expect you to know the domain, their industry, and sometimes even your product culture. And that helps them to hire more ICs without creating complex organizational structures, so they can stay agile and fast-moving. So yes, I think IC track is a real thing, but same as enhanced paternity leaves and generous pension contributions, they're mostly found in more mature, advanced products and tech organizations. So if that is the future of IC roles, what is the future for me? I still have about 20 years of career ahead of me, and the average British worker makes a change every 5 years. So it's not unlikely that I'm going to make another change. And with recruiters contacting, I've got options. I can stay with IC track or go back to people management. But whatever it is, a change, a pivot, or a complete reinvention, I hope that I'm going to face it the same way I did, with curiosity and believe that anything is possible. And I hope you will do too. Thank you very much for having me.
Massive thank you to Maria. It's very interesting to hear her perspective on the IC versus managerial routes. Sometimes a particular track can be glorified when you look online. So it's always nice to have a very candid experience of someone that's been through both an IC and a managerial route. The Slido link is here, so if you would like to ask questions, please do scan the code or put the code in as well. We've already had a lot of good questions, so please continue to put the questions through. So now, we as product managers manage products, right? We look after our own products. But sometimes we often forget that we're also in charge of one of the biggest products that we can ever own, and that is our own career. So how can we own our product career like a product manager? To elaborate more on this, let's invite James.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm really excited to introduce something to all of you that until today, I've only used with coaching clients of mine and with people who've joined a career planning workshop that I do. Before I dive into some of that, I do have just 2 questions. First, independent of whether or not you are a product manager, who here works on or has a product roadmap? By show of hands. Wonderful. An artifact, a written artifact, something that you could point to substantiate or explain what's being worked on that's going to eventually lead to some type of ideal outcome, right? That's what roadmaps are all about. Now imagine what would happen for your product if you didn't know what you were working on or how what you were working on was going to contribute towards some long-term outcome that you want. It'd be a bit of chaos, right? So I want to ask another question. Who here has a career roadmap? By show of hands. All right, I see a few. Wonderful, right? A written artifact, something that you could pull up that reflects what you're going to be working on now, how that's in service of some outcome that you're trying to achieve. Don't worry, most product managers, and actually just most people in general, don't have a career roadmap. They just kind of navigate it as they go along. And that's okay, but I'm on a mission to change that. So my name's James Gunaca, as Kunal said. And last year, I founded a business called ProductSphere. And it takes a community-based approach to help product managers achieve outcomes like getting to the next level, landing your next role, or just applying product principles to your career and other things like the job search. A little bit more about me. I've spent 20 years in product and marketing, a journey not too dissimilar, although there are some things that are quite different that I did not experience that she did in terms of my background. I've lived and worked across the United States and then here in Europe as well. And I've been coaching hundreds of PMs from as far west as Seattle to as far east as Singapore to achieve those types of career outcomes. That's just my LinkedIn profile. If anyone wants to connect with me, I certainly welcome connecting with all of you. But back to this topic of managing your career like a PM. What does that actually mean? Why did I decide to create a career planning workshop and call it that? Well, to explain that, I want to just zoom out a bit and talk about some terms that you're probably familiar with as PMs. Starting first with product vision. This really just articulates what do you want to achieve over the long term, many years ahead. What is your product supposed to do? What problem is it supposed to solve? What value is it supposed to create for customers? This is typically articulated in a vision. Then you have a product strategy, right? What are the big building blocks that you're going to achieve in service of realizing that vision? You have your product roadmap. What's going to be happening now? What's going to happen next? Maybe what happens later after that, if you use that roadmap format. That will help you achieve some of those strategic outcomes. That's going to be in service of realizing this vision. Then your product probably has lots of different features. Some things it does really well, some things it doesn't do really well, and some things that you know it should do, but it doesn't yet do. And then finally, you've just got mechanisms throughout all of these. Your retrospectives, your sprints, right, reviewing results, doing business result reviews with leaders, etc. And so what I realized in looking at this was that these mechanisms and these tools that we use to do our job adapt incredibly well to managing a career if you look at it like a product. So here's how we would apply that lens. You have a career vision, right? Common question people hear early in their careers, where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years? Most people, they have no idea. And that's okay, you figure it out. Eventually, it starts becoming more clear to you. If you've been working for 10 years, maybe the next 5 years is something you have a little bit of a clear idea about. That's your career vision. In 5 years, I want to be the CPO of a fintech startup in the UK. Not mine, just an example. Strategy, right? What are the big things that need to happen from where I'm at today to where I want to be? Well, if I'm an IC and I want to be a CPO, I need to start line managing people. That is a strategic step that I need to make. At some point, I need to start managing people. Roadmap, though. What am I working on this year? What new skills am I going to build? What new things am I going to achieve or accomplish or experiment with in service of achieving that strategic outcome or realizing that vision? In your product features in the context of your career, these are the skills that you have or the skills that you need to build that you don't have or that you might not even know that you need. And then, just like a product, you've got mechanisms. For most of us, this reflection is annual performance reviews, maybe promotion assessments. These are typically the only mechanism individuals get where they're assessed in terms of how well they're doing their job. So today, I'm excited to introduce to all of you a skill assessment, and we're actually going to do this together. So take out your phones, scan this code. I'm going to leave this up here. But today, we're going to assess your skills as a product manager. Now, if you're not a PM, maybe you want to be one, you should do this too. As you heard from Sarge earlier, there are likely some skills and experiences that you have that will adapt well to becoming a product manager, but you won't know that unless you know how to assess yourself. Now, this is the page that you should see when you open it up on your phone, although it'll be squished down on your phone, right? In terms of the information, it's just to send you the results. I'm not putting anyone on a mailing list, right? You're not going to get any spam. It's just so you get access to your results. And let's walk through what some of these questions will include. They'll look like this, all of them actually. There'll be 12 that we'll go through. Yes, question. I would strongly encourage that you use your cell connection, and if you have no reception, yeah, there's an authentication, but I think it requires registration. By show of hands, who is not able to access it? Oh my word. All right. Well, I can't open up a personal hotspot that's going to feed 50 people. What's that? Who here was able to access it? Okay, all right. I'm gonna move ahead, right? This is all low fidelity, right? You don't need a high-speed connection. There's no video. There's no images. It's just text and a button. Very lightweight. And don't worry, this link will. You could do this later as well, but I think you'll get a lot of value if you go through it with us today. So here's what the questions will look like. What level of experience do you have with skill? In this case, continuous discovery. Now the rating will be on a 4-point scale. From 0, I have no experience, I've never done this. And there's descriptions for each of the skills. Basic understanding. In many cases, this is you've either heard of it, maybe you've done it a couple of times, but you would need a lot of help to do it. Some experience. Maybe you've done this with intent, maybe you've done it a few times, maybe you've done it on multiple teams, and then confidence in this skill. In most cases, you would know what to do even if no one gave you any instructions when you joined a new team. Or you could teach or have taught other people how to leverage these types of skills. Now, I'm not gonna go through every single one of these, but I wanna talk about the skill categories that I came up with and what each of them are. Now, there's 4 different categories. 3 of these map to the product development process. You've got discovery, you've got strategy, and then delivery, right? These represent the arc that you'll pass for product development, right? And then there's people. This is a very collaborative function. You work with so many different types of people, different types of teams and leaders. And so there's a whole bucket of skills related to working with people. I'm gonna go through these and just kind of show you what they all are. The ones in bold, they're the ones covered in the assessment. I've only got a limited amount of time. Having you go through 26 different skill assessments would probably take too long. So I picked out the ones that I thought would be most valuable. So you've got things like continuous discovery, which even if you've never heard about it, this is basically just making sure you're talking to your customers or potential users, understanding their preferences, their feedback, understanding what their problems are, how they use your product. You've got writing requirements, right? Now, how this is done today maybe will be different than it was done a few years ago, thanks to things like LLMs and ChatPRD and stuff like that. But in some form, you're gonna have to have requirements that communicate to teams what needs to be built. You've got customer research, you've got market research, you've got experimentation, right? Experimenting with things early on in the product development process. Business case development. This one's really critical. Understanding the value that your product needs to deliver and substantiating investment, right? This is something that's often overlooked by earlier stage product managers is how much is it gonna cost to build this thing? How much is it gonna cost to maintain it? And when are we gonna get our money back? And then finally, prototyping. On the strategy side, obviously, product vision and strategy, right? Have you written these? Have you contributed to these? Have you seen what these look like? OKR and goal setting. My hunch is some of you have been accountable for OKRs or goals, but confidence and experience in this is you write them. You know how to assess. You know how to differentiate between a well-written goal and a poorly written goal. Then there's the obvious road mapping, which is itself a strategic component, right? Prioritization, how do you make trade-off decisions, which you're gonna do a lot. And then go to market. How do you plan what you're going to announce, how you're gonna let customers know. And then on delivery, there's a few. Continuous delivery. This is more common in software development, product life cycles, right? Shipping things in different environments on some regular cadence. You've got your delivery mechanisms, the retros you do with engineering, maybe the feedback loops that you capture from your products. Instrumentation, right? Making sure that your product's gonna be able to tell you how it's being used, what's working and what's not, which is separate from the analysis itself. How are you interpreting how people are using your product? And how are you able to speak to the performance from last week or last quarter? So those are the parts of the product development process. Then you've got all these different people skills. There's just at a high level cross-functional collaboration, but you've got working with senior leaders, you've got working with designers, engineers, managers, your internal communication skills, whether that's sending emails to people, whether or not they read them. How you write an email to an engineering manager should be different than how you write an email to a CPO or your CEO. How you send Slack messages should be different than how you communicate in a meeting with 100 stakeholders. Right, so there's different ways to manage internal communication. Line management, if you're pursuing the path that involves leadership, right, that's a skill in itself. And then a few soft skills, earning trust, influencing, and my MVP for product skills, storytelling, which I think is something that it is a foundational skill that applies across everything that you'll ever do as a PM. So those are the skills across the categories. If you make it to the end, connection pending, you'll get results that plot out your skill depth across a radar chart on the left, and then across those 4 categories on the right, with some guidance on, how to think about your skills. The intent here is not to tell you you're an associate product manager, or you're a senior product manager, or you're this kind of product manager. That's not what this is about at all. In fact, this is intentionally not exposing level or helping you calibrate where you are in your career. The intent here is to highlight which skills do you have that can serve as input or serve as focus areas for you to achieve the next outcome that matters. You trying to look for a new job? Which skills are you confident in? Which skills do you have experience in? Those are ones for you to lean into. Those are the ones to make sure show up in the right bullets on your CV, as Sarge shared earlier. Where there are gaps, where there are opportunities to improve. Well, if you're looking for a new job, maybe you want to look for a job that's going to help you close that skill gap. They're going to give you the opportunity to write goals if maybe you weren't able to write goals in your last job. Or maybe they get to do discovery practices and you've been in lots of delivery mode. I want to share a couple of examples, though, of what a completed assessment might look like and illustrate to you a bit what this might mean for someone. So let's take product manager A. I'm going to come over to this side. Product manager A. Index is really high on discovery, really high on strategy, works with lots of different people, lots of skills there, but hasn't delivered much. Not a lot of experience in delivery. This, to me, would probably be a product manager who's worked at a consultancy for a number of years, right? They get very heavily in understanding the customer, the problem space. They make pitches. They work with all these different functions. Then they hand off some deck or something to some other team who goes and builds it and does all the work. This does not mean that they're not a good product manager. Doing discovery is really hard. Thinking about the right strategic steps to make is really difficult work. And getting other people to buy in on that work, that's difficult as well. That's where those people skills come into play. But if someone's thinking about what do I want to do next in my career, they probably want to go and deliver stuff if they want to close a gap or become a more well-rounded product manager. Let's look at PMB. All right, this PM, heavy delivery, doesn't get to work with lots of different functions, doesn't get to do a lot of strategy, maybe he's been involved in some discovery. My hunch here is that this product manager probably works or feels like they work at a feature factory, right? They just get told what to do. They maybe understand some of the information that went into the decision-making about what to build, and they can ship stuff so well, so reliably, but they crave something more. So when they understand where these gaps are, that can, again, act as a guide for what to focus on next. And then last example, product manager C. Really wide over on people, really wide on strategy. Can you guess? This is probably a CPO, right? Doesn't do a lot of discovery or delivery work anymore. They empower other people to do that. This doesn't mean that this person, again, is lacking anything. This just represents kind of where their skill strengths lie and where either opportunities exist that are maybe important to focus on or maybe not important to focus on, depending on what outcome is that matters to them that they're after. So what? So why did I want to come and talk about this? Why did I build this career planning workshop to help people with this? Well, it turns out, and I've interviewed lots of product managers that work at many different types of companies, and I'm still actually interviewing more today. Many of them work for companies who don't tell them anything about how well they're doing as a product manager. They don't have any way to tell them, here are the parts of product management you do well, and here are the parts that you don't. This makes it really difficult for those PMs who care deeply about their performance to know what to focus on, how to get better. And so when you understand a bit more about your skill depth and where the gaps and the opportunities are, you can now build a more intentional plan to grow and reach other outcomes that matter in your career. So what do you do with this information, right? Say you completed this assessment today, now what? Well, first, just being able to understand the skills and where there may be gaps is just one piece. The next thing I suggest and I work with people to do is substantiate that rating, right? You all had an opportunity to complete a rating, you get a little bit of a report, but I found that when people self-rate, they tend to overrate themselves. They tend to think more highly of themselves because they haven't been challenged. No one said, hey, where's the evidence to support that you have deep experience in this skill? So that's what I encourage people to do is I say, okay, you gave yourself a 3 on this skill. Well, what evidence is there to prove that you have that? Have you been running continuous discovery for the last 5 years at your job? Okay, all right, okay, I hear you. That's great. So make sure that as you're assessing yourself, challenge yourself to provide examples, write them down. When you have these written down, they have another effect. They serve more value than just your career planning. Maybe you're trying to find that next job, right? Where you have that experience and the evidence that you have to substantiate it, that forms the basis of a story you're going to tell in an interview. So what else can you do then? So determine what to focus on next once you've completed a skills assessment. Identify the opportunities that exist to improve, right? If you're working currently and you know you want to grow, there are probably opportunities for you to focus on this skill improvement. And when you know which skills are potentially gaps for you, now you can say which one of these are important to focus on and how might I create an opportunity. Back to the OKR and goals example, how often are those written at the company? Can you ask your manager, hey, I'd like to propose some goals the next quarter. Is that something you could work with me on? Can you support me in that? Right? That's going to give you the opportunity, if they're supportive of your growth, to build that skill. And then use this to inform your career roadmap, right? What are the things that you're going to do this quarter that are going to help you achieve outcomes that matter? Attending networking events could be something that goes on your career roadmap. Completing an assessment could be something that goes on your career roadmap. Taking a course, I'm sure plenty of people here have considered, or probably many of you have taken or invested in courses. That's all part of your journey to achieving outcomes that matter to you. And that's ultimately like what I'm trying to help people do, is achieve outcomes that truly matter to them. Thank you. Thank you. If you want to learn about ProductSphere, that's one last QR code. But again, if you had any trouble accessing the assessment, just come ping me and I'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for showing a very interactive presentation on how we can upskill as PMs. I'm very, very sorry about the technical issues. However, this session today is recorded, so you can go on the Mind the Product YouTube channel tomorrow, and you'll find the entire recording where you can scan the QR code and complete the assessment later on as well. But no, big thank you to James for that interactive presentation. The Slido link is here as well if you'd like to ask any questions. So now we'll take a 5-minute break just to set up for the Q&A. Please do complete your questions. There's food and drink available as well. If you do need to leave, then you'll need a visa person or someone from security to take you upstairs. So please just wait near the lifts and someone will be able to escort you. It's right now 7:47. We'll reconvene at around 7:55. See you guys in a bit. Well, coming back, we had this small little icebreaker at the start of the event just to ask people to describe their role in like one sentence. And I found it quite funny that one person wrote, as a PM, I put out fires, start a few, and have meetings about fires as well. Pretty much describes a PM
Accurate.
role. But let's move on to the questions. Thank you, Amanda. So thank you very much for everyone for submitting your questions. We've got a great list, which you'll be able to see on the screen as well. So first question for Sarge, related to breaking into product management. What's the real deal with cover letters as a hiring manager? To what extent do they matter?
Great question. Yeah, I'll be honest. I think right now I wouldn't do a cover letter. I don't think it's going to make you really stand out from the crowd. I think if you nail the CV and you can tell it through that experience, that's really what's going to be important. A cover letter with AI now, like you could spin it up in seconds, and in reality for the hiring manager, unless you've got a really cool like maybe side project that you've worked on and you really want to talk about that in detail, I would actually advise against cover letters. I don't think it's a good use of time. It's hard enough as it is trying to get applications into lots of different companies.
I have a data point on this I'd like to add. So actually today I published the results of a poll where I asked hiring managers and recruiters for product roles, how often do they review cover letters? 52% said none of the time. And another 26%, so 78% total, said between like 0 to 2% of applicants. And so as you heard earlier, right, hundreds to sometimes thousands of applicants, no one's reading cover letters, right? They're busy just reviewing CVs alone. I did say, with one exception though, if you find a job that you would stop everything that you're doing that day, that moment, to apply for that job because you feel like you're a perfect fit for it and they're a perfect fit for you, then don't beat yourself up over it. Invest the time to write an authentic cover letter, because that motivation and energy you have because you really want that specific job will come out in the cover letter. But just know there's a strong chance that no one's going to read it anyway, and it won't make a huge difference on your application conversion rate.
What I can add here is you may want to invest into thank you notes instead for the interviews. And
Good
that is
call
something that worked for me. I have a personal story here. I interviewed for a product director job at Trustpilot. My interview was with the hiring manager, with the CPO. So by the end of that interview, he said, I don't think you're cut out for the role. And I said, okay, well, I get it. And I wrote a thank you note explaining why I still think I have the skills that they're looking for in this role, as well as acknowledging his concerns. So 12 interviews after I got an offer and I took on that role. So those kind of thank you notes that are genuine, that show your motivation, that show how you see yourself in this role and what drives you, they do work.
Amazing, thank you. So cover letters are less important unless you believe it's a very strong fit, rather than that just having that follow-up or building that rapport with the hiring manager or the interviewer is far more helpful. Brilliant, fantastic. Next question, very, very relevant for today's day and age. As a PM aiming for a senior role, is it worth investing time in learning SQL and other similar skills, which will be automated by AI very soon? So basically, is it worth learning how to code and other programming languages? So for anyone.
I'm happy to give my thoughts on this one. So you did not see SQL as a skill for product managers to assess themselves on. There was an event I went to last week that talked about like how important technical skills are. And so my perspective on this is that technical skills like this, they can be valuable. You can find ways to extract value from them, but you don't need them to be successful. And I certainly wouldn't suggest someone targeting a more senior role to be like, go learn this thing that you could just ask an LLM to write a query for you. I get not every company is going to let you use an LLM, but that's just because they're still relatively new. But very quickly, you'll see that you could just ask an LLM to write a SQL because it understands the data tables. And so the value you'd spend, like the time you'd spend building that skill, isn't going to drive a lot of long-term value.
I'd probably just add that, like, I think learning something like SQL it's quite a low barrier to entry, in the sense of if you want to try and upskill yourself and get a bit more technical, if you want to then learn Python or something like that, like it's a good way to start working with putting in words to create outputs, which can be a bit odd when you're first kind of getting into the technical space. So it could be like a nice segue into trying to do something more with the code space. I don't think it's a requirement. I think it also depends on the scope of your role. So if it's going to be more of a startup, maybe dabble in it a little bit. It's great if you can then get involved. At a startup, everyone's looking at each other like, hey, how do we solve this problem? And if you can jump in and you can add value, great. Bigger company, I still think there is value, but yeah, I don't think it would be something that would be like a tick cross in terms of whether or not you get hired into the role.
I've got very little to add here. I can't remember a product manager role on one of my teams where that would be a skill even in the top 10. But I do hear your perspective that it may be valuable for very specific companies like startups where you're usually having a few hats as a product manager. One of them may be data analyst as well. Then that skill will help you to access data yourself. And yeah, it would add value. But generally in product management career, no, I cannot think of it as a top 10 skill.
Cool. Yeah, no, very fair point. I've been reading recently, vibe coding is becoming quite a prominent thing. So for those that don't know what vibe coding is because of a lot of these AI tools, anyone without any AI, any coding knowledge can build like very, very interesting products and tools. If you do have technical knowledge, it's fantastic because you'll understand how it works, because these things aren't invincible. They aren't perfect. They will make mistakes. So having a good knowledge will help you understand under the hood what's going on and how you can improve it. But no, very, very valid points. Next question, pivoting a bit more into getting a role and or making a career transition, is what questions would you ask in an interview to understand what the product culture is like, especially if you don't have anyone in your network to ask?
I have a question that I always ask. I ask, how do your product managers decide what to build? And that gives me a very clear idea whether they're being told what to do or they're actually more empowered to go out, discover customer insights, customer problems, and work on solutions. And then I usually ask a bit more detailed step-by-step process. But yeah, that question just helps me to understand what is generally the product culture like.
Any other thoughts?
So this, if you don't have anyone in your network to ask, like focus on growing your network. So reach out to some product managers. Like you'll find that we're quite amenable to connecting with new people and learning from them because our job is different no matter where we work. But for a specific question, I always advise people to ask behavioral questions. And so tell me about a time when you saw the product culture like was ineffective. What did you do to change it? How did you change it? Right? This kind of would get someone to tell you more of a story of what's happened at the company versus something broad or open-ended like what's the product culture like or how would you characterize the product culture? Because generally if they're asked open-ended questions like that, they're just going to speak about it in a very positive way. But if you ask them like, tell me about a time when it was not working well or you saw an opportunity to improve it, like what did it take to make that product culture better? How is better defined? It takes some confidence to ask questions like this. You also want to ask the right people. So make sure you know who you're asking. If you ask, the recruiter this question, they're not going to have a good answer for you. If you ask an engineering manager this question, you might hear a different perspective on it. So that'd be my guidance.
Arch, anything?
Yeah, I was thinking the only thing I'd probably add is asking maybe a little bit probing into kind of how often do their PMs come together and meet, what forums do they have. Obviously, as PMs, it can feel a bit like an isolated role at times. So that connectivity when you get together as a big group and you have the opportunity to learn from each other, that's really where you can get a lot of value. And companies that do that a lot typically have a very strong product culture.
Cool, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Maria, related to your presentation, how did you, given that you made quite a few switches between IC and managerial, how did you decide between the IC versus managerial track? And I'll add a quick follow-up. What's your preference?
Okay, well, not an unexpected question. Well, listen, I think if I'm being brutally honest, my very first decision on pursuing a track was more from just a natural flow. So I just naturally, firstly, flowed, sorry, into people management track. Then when I was offered an IC role, the real the real parts of the role that I was after was 0 to 1 innovation. I was really curious to build something from scratch, unlocking that innovation pipeline. And as I said, the role had a potential return into people manager, which I knew I could do. Then you heard my talk, so I found that yeah, I'm still more excited about portfolio, running the portfolio, getting those results, improving those metrics. So I continued in that direction. My last choice was rather conscious choice, but I already knew what IC was about. And I think, to be completely honest, a lot of personal things played into that decision. I had a child 3 years ago. I realized it's quite difficult at times to balance that pressure, deadlines. Like you do work extra hours as in senior people management role, where strategic roles are a little bit more paced out. There are less of emergencies, less of fires. They're still very impactful, but they just provided more of a balance. Plus, I was missing that strategic side. I was curious to go back to it. Once again, the actual role that was offered to me was looking after a massive product and build strategy for that product. So I guess at every stage of your career, there will be things that interest you a little bit more that you want to do. at this stage, it's strategy. I actually got interested in strategy topic like for years. I have an MBA, but it didn't give me to build product strategy the way we build it. And I was looking for good guidance, good practices in product strategy. And what I was seeing was glorified backlogs mainly. So I was really curious, like, how do you build good product strategy? Tesco is really good at this. So I'm also learning a lot in that space and taking a lot on board. So it just appealed to one of my big interests and one of those skills that I wanted to advance. And this role helped me advancing my skills, doing what I love, also providing me at this point in time in my life and career the balance that I need.
Amazing. So it's very much what's the goal you're trying to achieve in your next role, which links back well with James's presentation about in your PM career, what's your next milestone and which type of career, whether it's managerial or strategic, whatever it is, will help you achieve that goal. Cool, nice. Sorry, did you want to add to it?
I realized I didn't answer your question.
Yes. Oh yes, I forgot myself.
Which one I prefer? Did you listen to my talk? I mean, honestly, every role has its upsides and downsides. Like once again, it's what is working for you at this point in time of your career. I don't think I have that clear preference. It's very difficult for me, but I really don't. I really don't exclude for myself an opportunity that I will go back into people management track because maybe I'll start missing it again.
Fair enough. Makes complete sense. James, next question for you. In terms of prioritizing skills, how would you trade off doubling down on strengths versus plugging weaknesses?
You'll probably hear this from me a lot, but start with the outcome that you're trying to achieve first. So if you're looking to land the next role, like having a better understanding of the weaknesses, and as you're looking at job listings, are you finding that there are certain weaknesses that you see a lot that they're looking for? Then there's probably value in focusing on plugging that versus like leaning into your strengths. If you're trying to angle to getting to the next level, yeah, double down on those strengths. Try to find ways that people can understand just how valuable you are or how many outcomes you've been able to drive where your strengths played a role in achieving that outcome, and lean into that to see if you can't continue to achieve more success. I did want to add something about, in the context of like IC versus manager, and this kind of plays into skills. Understand, are you actually good at being a leader, a people leader? Do you care about people's growth and development? And if you don't, please don't go be a people manager. Because I don't know, raise your hand if more than half the managers you've had cared about your development, like truly cared. Like more than half of your managers in your entire career truly cared. You are exceptional in terms of the experience you've had, because most people's managers don't care. But maybe that's because they just haven't assessed that as a skill of theirs to work on. So I think keeping that in mind as well is important.
Saj, Maria, anything to add?
Interesting question. Sorry, can you just remind me?
Should you double down on your strengths, or should you prioritize plugging weaknesses? I think.
Yep. Listen, it all depends on what your goals are.
Outcomes.
Right? So it all depends on what your goals are and where you're going with your next step. So you need to have a very clear idea of where are your potential gaps and how you're going to close this. So I very much agree with the talk that you had, like understanding what is required in the industry, what is required in that particular line that you're pursuing, in that type of product manager role, which are very different across different organizations. That will help you to understand where you need to close the gaps. And there will be gaps. Like I had gaps in my career. One of the first gaps that I had to close was when I went for a round of interviews just to see what's out in the market. And I was told, well, you never worked with on-site engineering team. And I said, what's the difference? And I still don't understand what's the difference. But it was important for those companies. Also, I had a gap in working with mobile, which I also closed within the next 2 years of my product's experience. And then, of course, the response was different. So you need to have that good understanding. And there will be gaps, I can reassure you. But also knowing your strengths helps you to stand out from the crowd. So when the company is choosing between 5, 10 similar profiles, how are you different? And that is where that doubling on your strength helps as well. So you're not just doing something really well, you're just doing it great. It's just really understanding what you're shooting for.
Wonderful. So focusing on the outcomes again, which will then help you understand whether to focus on the strengths or double down on your weaknesses. Next question. What would be your top tips for a PM looking to change industry or domain? Saj, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, it's a good one. As Maria said in her talk, like this is potentially getting harder. With the amount of people that are applying into certain roles, it means that hiring managers have a lot more choice, and hence that they have to refine kind of their criteria down. One of the great things about trying to break into different domains, or one of the things I've done that's been quite useful, is follow interesting people in that space on LinkedIn. Follow folks that are kind of writing about it. See what they're talking about. Often you'll see like a piece of industry news that otherwise you'd have had to kind of search for or dig out. And again, that can really help when it comes to kind of framing your conversation within an interview setting. Obviously, if you're trying to break into something and you're trying to get that CV through, look, I'll be honest, it is tough. So again, this kind of comes back to my point around building for your gaps. Like, how are you trying to go above and beyond to build that experience? So you need to make sure, I guess, that you really are interested in doing it, because it's not going to be easy. You are going to have to put the work in. Fintech, for example, is quite a tough industry to break into. There's a lot of acronyms. There's quite a high barrier to entry in that sense. So go along to fintech networking events. Go along and see what others in the sort of domain are talking about. Get to know people at these events. Try and maybe do some parallel roles that you can then potentially feed into PM from. But that's probably a few options I would suggest. I'll pass over.
Change is inevitable. Just going back to what I said. You're going to have these moments in your career every other 5-7 years. You will be trying to change the role. You'll be trying to change the domain. You'll be trying to change the company. So the strategies in that space, they're universal. You really need to understand your strengths and what sells you for the role, and how you can showcase those things that you do really, really well, how they can really make you successful in that role. At the same time, understanding what is required there, be honest with the hiring managers, like what is there that you're happy to work on. Because to be honest, every hiring manager knows that they're not going to get a perfect candidate. And actually, it's not a bad thing to have some weaknesses. When I hired people for my team, I wanted to make sure that they're motivated in the role, that they will be learning something new, that there is not something that they've done over 100 times. So actually, it was not such a big thing unless it wasn't creating a really massive gap with the role. So you should totally believe that this is possible. And the other thing is just keeping going, because everyone gets rejected. I have over 12 years of product management experience plus my marketing experience. If I go right now on LinkedIn and apply for 100 head of, director, principal product manager jobs, I'm not going to get 100 interviews. I'm going to get rejections as well. So this is also part of the normal process. So that should really guide you and give yourself time to get there, because change is always hard, but it's totally possible.
Only to add, in terms of top tips, it sounds like just manage your own expectations. If you're not currently working and you're trying to break into a new domain, it's going to be really difficult. And just know that your application conversion is going to be poorer if you're trying to break into a new domain. If you're actively working and you're trying to break into a new domain, just know that it might not happen right away. And it's going to take some rejections to get an opportunity. Some hiring managers favor people who have domain experience. Some favor candidates who do not. But you can never detect this right away just by talking to someone unless you ask the right questions. To detect it on a job description, right, it'll say very clearly near the top of what we're looking for. If within the first 2 or 3 lines it says they want that domain experience, just know that if you don't have it, you're likely not going to get interviewed. Last tip, if you're trying to make a transition, try to find companies that maybe work in multiple domains. I know there's not many, but they exist, and see if you can't make a transition internally. That's one other path to potentially consider. Just know that, again, it's not something that's easy to do. It's not impossible. So just have realistic expectations.
Just to summarize that, change is inevitable. It is possible to move domains. It is definitely much harder. So the tips were to look internally or to look through your network and ask better questions of what's actually required for that particular domain and how you can upskill yourself. Or also look in the JD, and if they have a particular domain they are focusing on, and if you don't have that domain experience, it might be a bit harder. So we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. The top one, which got 10 votes, so very, very popular question. James, what trends do you observe in the PM market? How do you anticipate the career/role changing in the next 5 to 10 years? Wow.
Great. That's a 2-parter. So first, for those of you who don't know, I publish a monthly report on the product management job market, both globally as well as regionally, including one specifically for the UK. So you can just connect or follow me on LinkedIn, whatever is your choice. The next one will be published next week. It's usually the first Monday of every month that I pull the data. What trends am I observing? So I'm just going to focus in on the UK for now. Number one, the number of jobs in the UK in product management, there's about 1,200, and that's down a few percentage points from 6 months ago and down further from a year ago. But there was some good growth at the start of the year. The mass majority of those roles are at the mid-level product manager level. Then the next big chunk are senior PM roles. And then it starts to get really competitive at the leadership level, as she mentioned, right? So there's only a couple of hundred product leadership level roles in the entire country. And there are thousands and thousands of candidates in the market vying for those roles. But beyond the leadership, the next one, and the one that's most difficult, because there's only 20 associate or junior PM roles open in the entirety of the UK. Right. And so really competitive, really limited options. And some companies will only hire associate or junior PMs internally. So those jobs will never be on the market. So those are some trends in terms of leveling. And then lastly, in terms of work environment, at least in the UK, there's a healthy amount of hybrid positions. There is no clear line of going back to the office 5 days a week. I think hybrid remains to be something that will be here for a while. Remote, there's still a healthy amount of those roles as well. So I don't see many huge changes happening in sort of the work environment. But there's more details in the reports that I share online. Happy to answer follow-up questions either in person or online later. The role changing in the next 5 to 10 years. I do not have a crystal ball. No one does. There's a lot of people who are making a lot of noise about how the role is going to change, but they're all just guessing. And so I would say, just stay close to what's important for you to succeed in your job and experiment with new things, but don't feel like if you're not over investing in all this upskill development and doing vibe coding, which is fun and interesting, and using AI for all these different things, all of these different tools and advancements will change the role. Change is inevitable. That's the recurring theme for tonight. But we don't know to the degree to which that it will change. But you probably got into this job, or you want to get into this job because change is interesting, because you don't want it to always be the same, because working in a different product management job at a different company is a completely different job, even though maybe you use some of the same language, and that's probably interesting to you. And if it's not, don't go try to be a product manager, because that's gonna be difficult. That'll be tension for you. So yeah, those are my thoughts on how it'll change. It will.
I was just going to pick up on, it looks pretty bleak, right? The number of associate product manager roles. But I think the point there is that number of roles there is probably not going to grow a whole heap, I don't think. So you need to try and find alternative ways. So it's not about kind of looking at that and going, I'm never going to be able to get into product. You can and you will. But what you need to do is you need to try and find that alternative path in. And exactly as James said, try to go to companies where you can build alongside PMs, build that knowledge, build that skill set, and then pivot across. Hiring PMs is quite a high risk thing for a company to do. So if they already know you, they already know what you're good at, it's very easy for them to bring you through and upskill you.
Yeah, and that's exactly why, as you said, companies will focus just on internal transfers. So if you have skills, right, that, or you have a career path and you're trying to transition, if you're currently working, like try to see if that path exists at your company. And if not, try to find a company that will hire you for the skills that you have, knowing that they might support that transition in the future as well. So you do it kind of in two putts instead of just one swing.
Amazing. Lots of good advice there. Final question for today. Do you guys have any application advice for someone returning to work after a 6-month career break? They're looking for PM or product management or senior product management roles, but they're not getting past the CV screen.
I can start with this. 6 months doesn't sound to me as long enough career break to worry about it at all. The industry hasn't changed much. Product management is the same. AI hasn't taken over our jobs, not in the slightest. So you should be still in a good place. Most likely what you're dealing with is a very tough market, which has been quite difficult for the last couple of years. And I think that's another trend that exists, is just more competitive. So my recommendation would be, first of all, focus on your CV. So if you get rejected on CV level, that means it's not quite catching the eye. So most likely you're not highlighting your strength, you're not highlighting your experience in the right way. Possibly you're not applying for the roles where you have most of chance of success. Maybe you're not aligning your CV with the requirements of the role. So think of that process of how you're selling yourself with this first step. Most likely there is something there, but also remember the market is really, really difficult right now.
Yeah, a good application conversion rate is at least 5 to 10%. And so if you're below that, almost always it's because of your CV or you're applying to jobs you're not a good fit for. I personally know people who've been out of work for over a year and they're getting a 10% application conversion rate consistently, because their CV is like well optimized and they understand how to represent their skills and experience. So I would agree, like 6 months as a career break, don't let that be a barrier for you. That's probably not what's going on. And instead, like, focus on making improvements to the CV, having hiring managers look at it that you know and trust, or working with someone to help you improve it. I've done a free class on this on YouTube. So go watch that and again, give it another go. But just make sure you're measuring it and getting feedback and iterating.
I'd probably just add, if you've been a PM or SPM, try to utilize your network. I'm sure you've got folks that you know. Try to leverage them, see if there's opportunities out there. Being here today as well, speak to folks, see if there's new opportunities. I think Kunal said that Visa's hiring, so I'm sure there's folks here that you could chat to. And yeah, 6 months is nothing. To be honest, in general, I don't think a career break is a bad thing. I think some people think there's stigma around this. It's probably a good thing. You probably had the opportunity to reset, think a bit differently. Depending on what the career break was for, use it as an opportunity to talk about all the cool things you did. Did you do some traveling? Did you learn some things? Make it kind of a bit more of a talking point and a superpower. Obviously, you're probably going to get asked about it if it has been a year or longer. So just be ready for that, ready to talk to it. But again, don't think it should be a barrier at all. I think it's just the state of the market right now. And I think, yeah, taking on board these points around the CV, try to improve your conversion there.
Amazing. A big thank you then to our three speakers, James, Maria, and Sarge, for sharing their insights today. A big thank you to Visa as well for sponsoring today's event, and a big thank you to all of you as well for coming today. We hope you found it insightful and helpful. The three speakers will be here after the event as well if you want to ask any questions. There might be some drinks available as well, but we hope you enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to seeing you guys next month. Have a good evening, everyone.